Hello and welcome to this MCT podcast. I'm Jonathan Brown, and this is the first of three conversations that I'm hosting with Brian Kardon and Nick Hahn from InVision. Hi, Brian and Nick.
Hello. Good to see you. How are you, Jonathan?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
We can start with you, Nick. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Hey there. I'm Nick Hahn. I'm Director of Design Systems Consulting at InVision. My background's in design, and I've been fortunate enough to work on some really cool projects at very small companies, very large companies, everything from early stage startups through my last organization was at IBM. So I had another thought, but it's gone. Yes, Director of Design System Consulting. It's a good gig here at InVision.
Excellent, thank you. And Brian, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Brian Kardon. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at InVision. I also run sales, which is quite a unique thing. All marketers fantasize about running sales, or at least telling the sales leader what to do. And now, of course, I point to myself, but we have great alignment. And what I've realized, less than 1% of all companies have sales and marketing in the same organization. So, and prior to this, where I got to meet you, Jonathan, was at Forrester Research, where I was head of marketing and strategy for about 6 years. And I've been in different software companies for about 15 years.
Excellent. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what kind of company InVision is? And I think we're particularly interested in understanding remote collaboration and how you guys do that. But give us a background first of what kind of company you are.
We're primarily a software company that is all about digital product design. And so companies from Uber to Netflix to Walmart to Amazon, they use our platform to make the best digital customer experiences. And we think the screen is becoming the most important place on the earth. I think COVID has perhaps accelerated this pretty dramatically. We were founded about 10 years ago. Interestingly, as a fully distributed company. We've never had offices in our history. We have about 700 employees. We have over 7 million users using our platform to build digital experiences, and we have 100% of the Fortune 100.
100% of the Fortune 100?
100%, yeah. We just hit that line last year, so very excited. More attention, though. A lot of pressure's on not to get that down to 99%.
Excellent, great. And you mentioned that InVision has been 100% remote since the beginning. So why was that? What was the reason for that?
Well, it's two reasons. As you might suspect, it was founded by a couple of entrepreneurs, and they wanted to save money. So just in total candor, it was to save real estate expenses. But more importantly, they wanted to live the product that they're building. And the product that we built is a product that is completely digital, and we enable wonderful digital experiences. We don't call it a remote company.
Right.
We find remote implies that some people are remote and some people in the home office. And I'm sure Jonathan, Nick, we both worked at places where you were either in the home office or you're remote, and it felt like two different worlds. When you dial in remote, they don't see you as well. It's hard to ask a question. You can't hear that well. But when you're a fully distributed company, everyone is exactly equal. It's really the democratization of participation. And it feels very different than having sort of a class system, home office versus being remote. So we call it fully distributed. And it's quite wonderful. I have a team all over the world. And as I said, I recruit people from all sorts of interesting places. I will say, and Nick, I'm curious how you feel about this too, we did have quite a competitive advantage recruiting before COVID. We were a company that if you wanted to live in remote areas, anywhere in the world, not near a city, we welcomed you. I think a lot of other companies are going that way, but Boston.
Yeah, it definitely was a huge factor for me joining the company. I didn't have to try to figure out how I was going to move my family. I'm in Austin, Texas, which is central in the United States, and it was a real easy transition. I just set up my home office, and that was the move. So it made it really, really simple. As well as my team, I've got several people on the West Coast of the United States. I've got a couple of people in London, and I work really closely with some folks in Amsterdam as well. And so any given moment of the day, it can be, I think my mornings end up being very busy because that's the best time to meet with most folks, but it gives me that chance in the afternoon where there just aren't as many meetings. So I get to, go heads down and get my work done that I need to get done. So,
I'm in Boston in the United States, and I've always run marketing at companies here. And I've recruited from the local market. Now I can recruit from anywhere in the world, and it really opens up an incredible talent pool, Jonathan. It's really quite wonderful. I have people on my team from Facebook and Amazon and companies I would never be able to hire from because I was trying to hire locally, and it really opens up a whole new world.
But for a lot of Japanese companies, that interpersonal relationship, the interactions that you have in the office are considered very important. And I think perhaps American companies also think that they're getting value from water cooler moments.
I joined InVision just before COVID-19. And the sort of promise and the idea of joining is this idea of purposeful focus, kind of self-control to say, this is the time I'm going to use for heads down time. This is the time I'm going to use for socialization. And there's a big part of InVision in which we IRL, right? In real life, we get together. But Brian, maybe I can ask you how the IRL events have been in the past, and does that give that sort of that togetherness and that spontaneity that you would get in office?
Yeah, it definitely helps. I think, Jonathan, Nick, there's a whole range of things we do to sort of get to know people as human beings and not just have meetings, which I know is such an important part of business and Japanese culture, that they're not separated, but you want to get to know colleagues and develop a personal relationship. The first is when you get on a Zoom call, you don't jump into business right away. You do what you would do if you were face to face. How was your weekend? How you doing? How are your kids? What's going on? And so you want to do some, breaking of time that way. You mentioned water cooler. We actually have a Slack channel called #watercooler, and people can talk about anything they want. And it's about sports. It's about their weekend activities, family. It's a whole range of things. And as Nick said, we also once a year have had all employees, all 700, come together. And it's quite an event. But also pre-COVID, we would encourage small teams to get together. So pre-COVID, I would get together with smaller teams. I would travel to San Francisco, to London, to Amsterdam, to Austin, Texas, to meet smaller teams. And it's very hard to completely be digital, I find, to get to know someone. There are some crazy aspects, though. When someone leaves the company, when they resign or they get let go, you can't take them out to lunch and celebrate them and say goodbye. It's a little bit like memorial services, and I hate to be morbid, but funerals now. It's just, you can't do that in this world. Even pre-COVID, we would just say goodbye to people. We occasionally do virtual drinks. So we'll have a cocktail and set up a little happy hour and drink, but that's not a very satisfying experience.
So that's an interesting point, though, that I hadn't anticipated, that for you guys as well, this epidemic, this health crisis is disruptive. Even though you're a distributed company, you have to have those.
It's particularly acute onboarding people. So Nick onboarded really well, but some people really enjoy onboarding, observing what other people do. Think about how salespeople or junior salespeople operate. They're in like a pod. They're seeing and listening to what other people are saying on the phone. We miss that. So to compensate, we record all of our calls. We have transcripts. We use AI bots to crawl through the text, what's going on. And so there are all sorts of things that we try to find some digital analogy to get there. But I find salespeople is very hard. They have to get the story, the narrative. And of course, the best way is through immersion. You listen to other people on your left and right and in your group talking. But the onboarding is quite challenging. And we use different software to sort of onboard people where there's like a checklist of things you have to do digitally. So there's like testing and there's things you have to listen to, but it's very challenging.
So if I was a salesperson and not during COVID, but outside of this strange time, if I joined InVision, what would I get? I would get access to other salespeople's calls that I could listen.
Yeah, you get many things. We hire salespeople in a cohort, so maybe it's 4 or 6 or 10 people join one day, and then they become part of a class, and they don't start talking to customers right away. They're just in a class and training. And to make sure they absorb all the material, there's testing that goes on. one thing we've learned is that there's a lot of Zoom fatigue. People can only do a few hours at a time, and then they have to take rests. They can't go a full 8 hours as you might expect in training. We've constructed a cockpit for salespeople so that they can listen to other people's calls, and we sort of rank them. So as you might imagine, a lot of people are calling, and some have good conversion rates. So they convert to get a meeting or they convert to get a sale. And so we rank the calls in different people. So we'll listen to Mary, who's been very effective. We'll listen to some of her calls, and either the salesperson can listen personally to that, or we'll do it in a group setting. We'll all listen to what Mary said together. And what do we like about what she said? When did she pause? Did she listen really well? How did she do her discovery? And so we sort of analyze all these calls.
Can anybody work effectively in a distributed organization, or is it just not, do you have to be a fit for that?
Well, we do some recruiting, and we have some tricks to sort of do that. We want to see how people present themselves. So without any forewarning, we'll say, oh, show me something, can they share real easily? Do they communicate effectively in this setting? Do they understand, some of the graces about letting other people talk and listening effectively? So we want to see how they work in a digital environment. And for some people, they're not comfortable doing it, and we would screen some of those people out.
And I've found that having a fully distributed company really enforces this sense of like clear intention. And so you have to be really intentional about turning off like your own personal time, about turning off your Slack, having heads down time, like actually stepping away to be able to getting up from your desk and going for a walk. Like those kind of things are very intentional. But it's also, if you think about larger initiatives where you're trying to get stakeholders and other people involved into things, if you're in a physical work location and the majority of your company is in that place, there's still silos, right? Like teams still have silos. There's still cultural barriers between groups within an organization. And I found that it's almost easy when you see people to think maybe you've built a relationship or broken down that silo. But in a lot of cases, I don't think people have had to do that. They sort of take for granted that you're in the same place. Same goes for management and employee relationships. How do you know what your employees are doing, right? How do you keep an eye on your employees? I don't really believe in that perspective because I think it's more about showing results. And I think having a fully distributed company, you have to be elevated to a point where you are building in trust and key performance indicators with your employees and the rest of your team to know that things are moving along, because you can't watch people, right? There's no, are they at their desk or not? And you just have to build this level of trust that doesn't necessarily have to exist when you're in an office.
In your company, do you measure that at all? Do you measure the number of hours that people are working, or is it purely a results evaluation? What do you have?
I haven't seen an hourly, I'm not sure about you, Brian, but we have KPIs that we track, and we have results that we're looking to get done every month or quarter. My team works in sprints, but we also work closely with customers. And so there's we see these touch points happening with customer engagements. And so that's far more important. And I think it helps bring a better work-life balance so that people can take care of the things in their life they need to take care of when it's needed for them, like going to the doctor. I don't require my team to say, I'm going to the doctor at 2:00 today. Just go to the doctor when you need to and get the work done that needs to get done by the end of the sprint or end of the quarter.
But you really have to have good communication,
Yes.
as Nick was sort of saying, that if you're going to be out for the primary part of the day, as you might imagine, East Coast, West Coast, Europe, APAC, the middle of the day generally is when lots happen. And so if you do have to be out for 2 hours, usually let your manager know that you're going to be out for a couple hours. Now, there are these subtle things where managers can know who's working and who isn't. There are little green dots that exist on a lot of applications.
Some companies have said, yes, we intend in the long term to make use of this, to have more people working from home. And I guess, companies are trying to work out what that means. If they'll have a hybrid model, or maybe flex time, that people will be in the office some days. What do you think are the positives and negatives of perhaps a hybrid model, of a model where some people are working from home, some people are going to an office in a more traditional way?
I think you can be very thoughtful about doing that effectively. And like you, Jonathan, I spent a lot of time in Japan. I've had a lot of Japanese clients. I actually worked for Deloitte Touche Tomatsu for many years as a partner there. And I think that if you're thoughtful about how you do it, but it does create two classes of people. And sometimes people who go to the office feel like they're the insiders, they're the cool kids, they know what's going on. And so you have to really over communicate to make everyone feel equal. And so I think restricting how many days a week for people, calling ahead really matters. I think an important issue is to over communicate. When I first joined this company, I thought I was going to have a team meeting. I have about 60 people on my team once a month, maybe once a quarter. But I quickly realized I have to do it weekly. So I actually have a weekly team meeting, which seemed an extraordinary amount of communication. But I realized that's really what it takes because, as you said earlier, it's not like I can walk down the hall and chat with a few people that are listening and make a quick correction to what someone said on the phone. So you have to really over communicate. So I do think a hybrid model can work, but we're seeing all sorts of things happen. I will note that some of the most progressive technology companies in the world, when they're trying to do something that's very creative and very focused, they'll create a war room where people will physically be together. And so sometimes for a very important project, particularly developing software, they'll bring in 30, 40 engineers from around the world. They'll actually live in London or Palo Alto or Austin, Texas for maybe a month or two, really get to know each other and really write code together and work very closely. So there's been a lot of work on productivity. Certain functions work much better together. A good example is what we talked about earlier, young salespeople, BDRs, SDRs, business development reps, the kids right out of school who are calling, trying to make appointments. They work very well when they're side by side with others to learn, but other functions work very well distributed.
My background's in design, and so I really believe strongly in iteration. As companies start going back into work and they start asking people to come into the office, don't set these hard and fast policies that this is what we're going to do for the end of time. Test it, right? Just try different versions of experiments of, team A, B, and C coming in on different days of the week, or let people schedule. I don't know what the right answer is. It's probably going to be different for every organization in some degree. But just try different things out and let people have a voice and say, this isn't working for me. Here's why it's not working, and pool that information and iterate and try different ways to work remote and work from home and work from the office.
Is there a limit to the size of a company that can do that? Do you think it's, if we start to talk about the large Japanese companies, Hitachi or NTT, tens of thousands of employees?
It hasn't been. There are some examples of companies that have tens of thousands of employees where no one is in the office. And it's the consulting firms, large consulting firms, where you literally go from your home to an airplane to a customer site, and now they're working from home. They really, they do hoteling or other things. When I was at Deloitte or Accenture, McKinsey, BCG, these are companies where sometimes you go to the office, but very often you're fully distributed in your customers' locations. An interesting phenomenon, something as Japanese companies look to having this hybrid model, and it's a thorny issue. Very often you'll hire someone in a fairly expensive real estate market, let's say Tokyo or New York City or London, and then 3 months later, they move to Costa Rica or Vermont or some extremely low-cost place. And they do it for obvious reasons. Do you adjust their salary to the local market conditions, the economics, or you keep them at the salary? But a lot of people do this arbitrage.
So what does InVision do if I joined in San Francisco for a San Francisco salary and moved myself to Costa Rica? Would I keep my San Francisco salary, or do you make an adjustment?
You keep it. You keep
Wow.
it. Congratulations. Yeah, we support those kinds of things. We're fine with that. We don't see much the other way. We hire someone in Costa Rica and they're moving to the Bay Area. I don't think we would adjust it up. There is some psychological pressure, though, not to give people the kind of merit increases you might give elsewhere. So you're not going to take it down, but over a few years, you might try to sort of normalize it a little bit. But we do celebrate this idea that you can have a new life experience by moving your location. So the person on my team who moved to Costa Rica, her kids are being, educated, they're now, bilingual in Spanish and English. They're having just an amazing experience. Whenever I'm on a video with her, there are monkeys crawling around the terrace and the balcony, and it's wonderful. So I sort of celebrate that. And I think a lot of envisioners think about, could I do that? Could I move to Barcelona or move to, a city I've always dreamt of going to? and have a unique experience.
I think the irony is that many large companies, if you're an international company, you already work distributed, and you've worked distributed for a long time. When I was at IBM, we 350,000+ employees. I was in the IBM Cloud Group, tens of thousands of employees in IBM Cloud. Every single day, I was on calls and meetings with people in Italy, in London, in India, and our team. It was ironic that sometimes we'd come into the office and then sit down at our computer and log into remote work and then just work remote all day long and then get up and drive home.
And thank you again. I know you guys have meetings to go to. I really am so grateful that you devoted this time.
Any chance to get to geek out on design systems and remote work and all those things is great. Great use of time.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.